For the next session, we're having Rupert, Allan, Dio, Kiggude, and Erica Hagen from Missing Maps and HOT. They're going to be presenting on the geospatial ethics, philanthropy, and politics of representation. Please, guys, take it away.
Hi, everyone. Just checking you can hear me and all. I think you can. Yeah, great. So this is Geospatial Ethics, Philanthropy, and the Politics of Representation. Thank you very much. It's brilliant to be here. We may be one person short. Deo may be struggling to join us in this conversation, and we have a couple of remote inputs that I need to play in video. But basically, my name's Rupert, and I've worked on quite a few projects with hot field. I'm a field person traditionally, but I come from a background. I live in Wales. I'm in a colonized country, and I'm one of the colonizers. Although I learned the language when I came here. I live in a village that has no translation in the English language, and it's not spelt with the English alphabet. So I really appreciate Emily's decolonial introduction, and a lot of the conversation here has that kind of background. My own personal background is I worked as a designer, a spatial designer in various different settings, and an anthropologist of space. So working with HOT as a country manager, it was a great opportunity because I felt a little bit like perhaps with the urgency of doing HOT projects in the field, the kind of disruptive potential and radical potential of bottom-up, sort of truly distributed OSM ethos was kind of, and culture, conversations about culture and conversations critically appraising the empowering approach of HOT from the field and the communities of the mapped people on the ground, as well as the remote community worldwide, was perhaps sidelined traditionally. And it's great to see such a great representation of these kinds of conversations. I used Uganda as a case study in a book. I didn't think I was going to be mentioning this book, and this is not meant to be a plug, but it can be. This is free to download, so it's open source. It's called Mapping Crisis, and I was asked to write a chapter in it. I'm going to show you a sort of quote from the blurb in a moment, but basically it's about the crisis of mapping and data colonialism and surveillance capitalism that's prevalent in the world, where so much depends nowadays on geospatial information and data. And my chapter is a kind of, it comes at the end, and it sort of says that the OSM is a possible counter mapping disruption of this. But it depends on certain things. OSM could be the answer to the problems of how corporate data is farmed, used, and basically colonialism has been by no means disappeared. It's actually become a digital element and is stronger and more powerful than ever. I would love, by the way, for anyone to give me any feedback on my part of the book, but there are some amazing chapters around what data colonialism means and how people's identity, as well as getting logged, can get obscured by data. It can misrepresent the human element in people and erase people through dark data. I really wanted to, so my argument is that OSM can kind of represent and kind of go against that, and people can control data. The OpenStreetMap, and I use the Ugandan OpenStreetMap projects with HOT as case studies, can really provide and empower the community, but it has to involve certain things. These are the labor of engagement, both for decision makers at high level, for administrators, but also most of all for people in the field. It's the premises that OpenStreetMap will be there. If it's there before Google, then everything's going to get mapped inevitably, but we can kind of displace the corporate mapping by taking control ourselves as people worldwide. This is a worldwide problem, not just in resource poor settings. But it needs basic and simple tech. There's too much trust in technology, I write, and I found this in the field, but you need to get buy-in. There's plenty of technology that's just enough to contribute extremely searching and important life-saving data to the map without a constant sort of looking for innovation overload. So HOT needs to really engage with some elements of culture and why people map from different situations and different perspectives, because incentivization to contribute is absolutely key to us, or OpenStreetMap as a movement or a following, maintaining this position that it's in and not becoming just yet another data colonial organization. I've been in situations where people didn't want to get mapped in resource poor settings. Often people object to getting mapped in the global north. It's about human rights and it's about culture as much as it is about humanitarian emergency. And that is something, again, that needs addressing. So my kind of project, or my push is to try and engage conversations about culture and criticism and communication of the OSM message at field level. So people at field level understanding that people from the global north might come, they might come for free, what volunteering means. I have different motives for being part of an operation than basically the people on the ground. I'm not taking a career rise, I'm not taking a pay rise. I'm doing it for other reasons that may be part of my colonial history, and it's not simple to say guilt. Philanthropy has evolved, I would argue, out of a scenario of being a checks and balances of colonial issue. But there's definitely been recently a push from the field to have a say, so that's really pleasing. And to be part right on the ground, not just in terms of a kind of local organizations or partner organizations at country level, but from the field up, from the village level upwards. I've got a video that I'm going to try and share now, but actually, no, first I'm going to share a quick set of slides if I can. I'll just go into this quick quote from the book. There's been an explosion in the use of mapping tools. And then I'm going to cut to halfway down. We only have 25 minutes. Some have argued that representation has diminished as people are increasingly reduced to data points. In turn, this data has become ever more difficult to analyze without vast computing power, leading to a dependency on the old colonial powers to refine the data of the poor before selling it back to them. It's really, really an important point that Doug Speck makes here. And we don't want to be part of that problem. So we need to acknowledge the voice from the field. We have different communities around the world. We have the remote mappers, we have the field communities, and we need to get them incentivized somehow. So whether we can put resources as a result in our future activities into millions of field level projects, I don't know. We have these amazing narratives which explain a lot from field level up, and I'm advocating for field level leadership to make these kinds of maps that can save lives but tell very localized, hyperlocal kind of stories with hyperlocal ethics. So I'm going through there very quickly because that's kind of what I've just told you. Annalie now is on video. I'm going to cut away from these because I'm just flipping through them and I don't have the time. But basically, these are the kind of field level stories that need to get shared, and OpenStreetMap has a kind of, and HOT have a responsibility to do this, I believe, and the space now to do that. So I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to go straight to the Annalie's input for this. She can't join us, unfortunately, in this call, but I'm just going to see if I can share. I may need some technical help, but I hope not. Just stop sharing 1 second. I'm going to need to flip out of here. Sorry about this. Okay. Annalie is respected throughout HOT. So we've had Annalie is a serious contributor to the field. On this call, I should introduce as well Erica Hagen, who's done a lot of work with Map Kibera. I'm hoping that Kiggude from Uganda, Map Uganda and Hot Uganda will be joining us too. So sorry to have not introduced those guys before, but I'm just introducing Annalie here, and here's her opinion on some of those views. Some issues around inclusion, always digital inclusion and community empowerment are the kind of watchwords of hot. Digital tech can get too difficult for communities, but Annalie has something that she'd like to describe around whether government take up data in the Philippines and whether the community feel included. So I'll hand you over to Annalie for a quick talk.
Yeah. Hi. Thank you, Rupert, for that introduction. But I want to start off with a brief introduction about me as well. I'm an OSM volunteer and contributor from the local mapping community in the Philippines since 20.
Hi, Rupert. I think the sound is very faint for everyone.
So based on my experience as a community member, I think we need to effectively commit this. We need to find balance and reinforce community care. Who is an
ongoing and prolific member of the Philippines OpenStreetMap community and is ever present at all of the events. The community, which is respected throughout HOT. So we've had some issues around inclusion, always. Digital inclusion and community empowerment are the kind of watchwords of HOT. Digital tech can get too difficult for communities, but Annalie has something that she'd like to describe around whether government take up data in the Philippines and whether the community feel included. So I'll hand you over to Annalie for a quick talk.
Yeah. Hi. Thank you, Rupert, for that introduction. But I want to start off with a brief introduction about me as well. I'm an OSM volunteer and contributor from the local mapping community in the Philippines since 2016, and I am also a HOT voting member since early this year. So based on my experience as a community member, I think we need to effectively communicate the importance of open mapping and open data, especially to the government. Because if people are informed and they see that this technology or science is used by decision makers and also policy makers and disaster responders, they will be encouraged to participate and take part. However, it may feel intimidating at the start, especially most tech people are feature or goal oriented rather than community oriented. So with this, we need to find balance and reinforce community care. At the Ministry of Mapping, a local mapping collective in the Philippines, we believe that map makers or the map volunteers and their labors are more important than the map or mapping itself. But we also believe that the community we serve or being mapped is more important than the map makers, the maps, and the mapping combined. And we see the community as not just mere beneficiaries, rather we want the mapping to be participatory and collaborative, and so we want to engage them whenever possible. We show respect to their privacy and their space, their land and their water by informing and consulting them beforehand. So my position and in my own personal opinion, HOT's decentralization or regionalization is a good step in making sure that people can relay their opinions and that they are being listened to or heard, and that the decisions and resources reach the communities we hope to serve. Audacious must be fueled up with the community consultations at all times and at all costs. So here in the Philippines, we're on the middle of the globe, and most of our mapping are mostly concerned in disaster response because we are a very hardly hit or we are very affected with typhoons. So I think the tasking manager has really helped us to make maps, prepare for disasters, and also our response to disasters. I think that's all.
Thank you, Annalie. Can everybody hear me now? Edgar, can you hear me?
Yes.
Wonderful. Okay, so sorry about that. I do need to rush along, I think. I was going to hope that Erica was there just to comment on that. You know,
We
and
have
talk.
Erica, I think.
I'm here.
Okay, so you know, there's a sort of issues around informed consent and stuff that Erica's going to cover in a really interesting session next, and that'll be amazing. But just not to cross over, but just to incentivize community engagement at that level, Erica, and as Annalie's saying, and engagement at government level. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I guess to me there's a bit of a tension between the volunteering aspect of OSM in much of the world and some of the, I guess, financial incentives to map. You were talking about incentives previously. She mentioned, you know, deferring to local communities as kind of more important than the technology and then the maps. I guess I usually, you know, I come from the point of view of speaking about mapping in Kenya and in Nairobi. It's not, there's perhaps always going to be some kind of a tension between the expectation of an altruistic participation and the incentives that are needed to map.
Yeah, and that whole question then leads to the freedom of choice question. I've been in situations with other NGOs where people from the field didn't feel like they could broach issues that weren't kind of part of what the NGO, they understood the NGO wanted them to think and to discuss. So although it was meant to be open, it was a kind of tokenistic situation. And also we found a lot in the field when we've been mapping that people, to get past data being given in the terms that the subject thinks that is expected can be very, very difficult, a real obstacle to data collection. And so I don't know if Deo's here, but Deo can testify to those experiences. We don't have, do we have Deo here with us? No, Deo was operations manager in Uganda when we were doing a lot of the field mapping there. And we adopted various tricks around trying to get community voice, but and in other parts of the world, I've done the same in people self-identifying to be in a place that they're not meant to be in can be difficult, and I think that's a slum mapping situation as well.
If you, I actually have some a quote here, if I could read it from Deo.
Oh, great.
From our meeting we had, because I think it's unfortunate he's not present, but one thing I wrote down that he said, if you don't mind, he said, inclusion of the community in the maps we are creating is important. For me, the point of the data usage, we always say we're creating for the decision makers, but we are all decision makers to some degree. How do we focus on what the information can do in the local community and see how the lowest workers, how can the information reach each person effectively? And as organizations grow, we can lose touch with local people and get mixed up in politics. I don't know if that last thing was his quote or my comment on what he said, but
yeah, I think people taking initiative can be a real issue both in the global north and global south digitally, you know, just with open data. And I think education of people, you know, across both cultural divides is really, really important, so that people, and that's why I've kind of mentioned again this sort of philanthropy, but there are various watchwords, and get people across the digital divide needs to happen at governmental level. I mean, politicians get exposed through data just like everyone else, so everyone's vulnerable to it. But you know, what is philanthropy? What does informed consent actually mean? You know, a lot of people in the field want to be on the internet. Is that, you know, is that safe? We just need to be more intelligent about cultural issues, and more simple about technical issues. That seems to be the surmise. I do have some input from David Garcia, and I'd like to quickly read that out, but I do want the floor to comment. Do we have some time, Edgar, for the floor?
I think we were running super late. I'm really sorry, guys, because we started kind of late with these sessions. I know Erica is next, so perhaps she'll have some time to speak on her session about a few things that she wanted to comment. But just to try to keep on with the schedule, because we have people jumping in between the rooms to make sure that they're catching the session that they're expecting. I think we should move on to the next session. But thank you so much for the presentation. I think it's a very meaningful discussion to have at HOD. Especially with the challenges that are incoming for the organization, and we look forward to keep on chatting about this in the future.
Can I just have the last word, Edgar, just to say
Please go ahead.
Whether we like it or not, HOT is attractive to Western donors. So after, and that is in some ways, even if it's just to be seen to, be interesting because it empowers extremely marginalized communities. It has the potential to connect donors directly with remote field counterparts, potentially more than any other NGO, but that is what will be lasting after Audacious. And it's very important, I think, to for the point of sustainability, to make that point, that we all should try and understand what that really means, that sort of decolonial disruptive potential of OpenStreetMap. Thanks.
No, thank you so much, Rupert. That's a great closing argument. On next, I've already presented